So now we turn it over to you, our listeners, for Ask the Artist. We asked you to send your questions for Nikkolas and we're overwhelmed with the response. What we can't get to here, we will, as always, put on our Instagram at Top Artist Podcast and over on Twitter at Top Artist Pod. You can also watch the full version of Ask the Artist on YouTube by clicking the link in the show notes. Let's get started. The first one comes from Zoe Ike on Instagram. And they ask, what are some steps you recommend for a young Black artist to start making money?
Good question. I mean, I would go back to the piece of advice of being consistent and putting art out there and putting it out there fearlessly. Use the tool of social media to get your stuff out there to the world as much as possible. And with that, for me with the sketch series, it was like, just keep practicing. Don't just keep practicing, but practice and put it out there at the same time. And the more eyeballs that get to your art, the more job opportunities will come.
So our next questions comes from J Art World. They ask, could you tell me any books to learn art anatomy? And I guess I could just cast it wider and say, do you have any resources? You're saying you were learning Photoshop along the way. Were there specific resources you looked to that you found really helpful?
Yeah, there's a ton. I mean, I remember I used to have a giant book. I think it was actually called The Art of Anatomy or something. There's tons of books like that. And I didn't go to art school, so I was in architecture school, like we were talking about. So yeah, I have a Master of Architecture and I make art all the time. And I ended up having to just go on, YouTube and find a lot of stuff on how to draw the proportions properly, limbs and, a head connected to a body and fingers that are closed and open and all this type of stuff. And there's a ton of resources. There's one called Sycra, Sycra. It's a YouTube channel. They have a ton of videos on basic anatomy and proportions and stuff like that. There's FZD School. And then I would say just always, like I said, emulate the greats. Like find the artists who you feel like are at the top of their game and study them. And they have studied all the great artists and they have taken all the anatomy classes and look at all of them, look at all of the YouTube videos. And it helps a lot. And just keep making terrible art until it gets better and better, pretty much.
No, I mean, that's great. I mean, back in the day, how it worked is that artists would go to major museums, sit in front of the most famous artwork and do sketch after sketch. So using that to build your base is a great way to go. Our next question comes from Sam, and she was interested in understanding how your background in architecture influenced you as an artist.
It definitely, I feel like I take so many lessons from architecture school with me every day. And I think part of it is just like understanding the proportions of like the scale of humans in the world, the scale of how we fit into nature, but then also nature next to the built environment. When I do a lot of concept art for films, I tend to go back more into my architecture skills and studies and things like that. I open up my Twinmotion software, which is one of the coolest 3D modeling softwares. I do a lot of 3D modeling, especially for film concept art, concept architecture. Got a chance to do some concept art for the Black Panther sequel, which I'm really excited about. And I work with Ryan Coogler on Space Jam sequel and Judas and the Black Messiah. With film projects, it's like you really gotta understand a lot about the built world and how people flow through spaces, perspective, all that kind of stuff. Camera angles related to perspective, and sometimes it ends up being storyboarding too. Just like you need more, to visualize the movement of people through space. So I end up thinking about like at the end of the day, like I'm like, man, I'm glad that I ended up going through this path. I don't feel like I have a wasted degree or anything.